The plan was to make a very short HDR tech review about Doom Eternal, and I ended up playing the game for several hours. The gameplay is just very addictive. HDR in this game is on a very great level and in my opinion one of the best HDR implementation what you can have out of the box.
The cleansing of Earth is a necessary step on the path to a brighter tomorrow.
Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't played Doom Eternal so far, then I think it is about time, because the game is just really fun. I had just some issues with ammo all the time, but that's a different story. Anyway, in regards of HDR, don't worry at all. Even we have five HDR settings in a game. If you're unsure what to do, then don't do anything, because the out-of-the-box experience in regards of HDR is one of the best I have ever experienced. That means even you don't change any settings in the HDR menu, you will have a very great HDR experience. Of course, just on a good HDR monitor. Don't put in the comment section that HDR is bad if you just play on a 400 nits monitor, okay? So the LGCX, in my opinion, or similar TV screens should be the minimum nowadays to enjoy HDR. But believe me, more nits is just better. So the first thing I like to talk about is contrast, and contrast is in my opinion one of the most important qualities what you must have to have a proper HDR or SDR picture. But what is now contrast exactly? Contrast means the difference between the darkest point of a picture and the brightest point of a picture. That means if a game or a movie can achieve zero blacks, or in other words we have a perfect black level floor, and also on the other end we have very bright specular highlights, that means we have a really good contrast. And the most important factor in contrast is the black level floor. It is much more important to have a perfect black level floor than having much brighter specular highlights, because having a very bad black level floor, and we have seen this in a couple of games so far, will ruin the whole picture. And in regards of the HDR black level floor in this game, I have very great news, because we're talking about reference quality. In other words, we have no issues whatsoever to achieve zero nits or OLED black if it is necessary or intended by the creators. So let's take a closer look on the HDR settings what we have in the game. We have HDR brightness, we have HDR saturation, we have HDR minimum stop, we have HDR white point, and last but not least we have HDR max stop. And because we have so many different HDR settings in the game, I think I don't need to mention that this game does not support the HDR system level calibration on PC or console. But the main question of course is, what are those settings are exactly doing? And because I have no idea what I'm talking about, I will leave this part to Tony. HDR is a scam! Thank you, Tony. So let's start with the HDR brightness, and the HDR brightness is changing the average picture brightness on the screen. Next on the list is the HDR saturation. With this setting you can either play the game in black and white or very oversaturated. Then we have the HDR min stop, which is responsible for shadow details. So if you increase this value or decrease this value, you have either very crushed blacks or more details in shadows. Then we have the HDR white point setting, which is a little bit similar to the HDR brightness setting, but towards the specular highlights more aggressive. And last but not least, we have the HDR max stop setting, which can increase or decrease the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights, but it also can oversaturate the picture. So now of course the question is, what should you change to have a perfect experience? And this is as always very hard to answer, because I don't know what monitor, TV or screen you're using. But to make it a little bit more easier, I have a couple of examples, comparisons, and yeah, let's just watch this and then let's talk about my recommended settings for the LG G2 and S95C. And now let's talk about my recommended settings for the LGG2, and all what I have done is I adjusted the brightness setting and also the HDR max stop setting. And I know that with my settings, the maximum peak brightness and specular highlights is already exceeding the maximum peak brightness capability of the LGG2, but I just like the picture better with my settings. And here are my settings for the S95C. The S95C has a higher peak brightness capability than the LGG2. That's why I decreased actually the HDR max stop setting even further. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this video. Let me know how you like my settings, let me know how you like the game, and let me know how you like HDR. And there is actually not much to dislike in regards of the HDR implementation, because it is, again, one of the best out-of-the-box experience what I have ever seen. And as always, I would much appreciate it if you can share your favorite settings for this game, because we have so many different TVs, monitors and screens out there. It is very hard for me to make actually a proper recommendation. But again, even you don't touch the HDR settings at all, you have a pretty good experience. And last but not least, never forget to like, share and subscribe. I see you guys next time. Bye.